Welcome to the Mapping Home closing reading. And I'm Katie Stone. I am one of the people who kind of helped create this whole project. And I really thank all of you for being here tonight. And, you know, the whole germ of this project started with an idea that, first of all, that people really can make a contribution by sharing part of themselves, and that it makes a difference for everybody else. So, and also that people can be moved and inspired by the place they live and the community and the people in their lives. So this project is really an expression of that. And what's been amazing is how it's really grown and genuinely reflected that. Suzette and Sally Koba heard about the project and then took on creating this evening. And all of the writers that are here tonight to share is really wonderful. It's just yet another expression. So thank you all for being here, and I'm going to have Sally come up and introduce the writing event. And just thank you so much for taking it on and creating another aspect of the project.
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, I want to thank Katie a lot. I heard her pounding on the wall there, setting up the map when I was in here one night, and I just asked her what she was doing, and when she explained it, I just thought it was such a great idea, and I wanted somehow to get involved, and then we just decided on a reading, which I thought was an excellent idea. And I guess as a writer, I always like writing that deals with place a lot, and people who talk about home. Think of certain writers like Jane Kenyon, where home is very central, or Jane Smiley, writers like that, who I've always appreciated. And I just think home is a really neat idea because you can use it so metaphorically in different ways. Like I know that some of the poems we're going to hear tonight is home as the body or home as a city. And so it's just very interesting how you can take this concept and move it in different directions. And I'm just really thrilled that all of you wanted to participate. And I want to thank you all for coming. And I think it's going to be a really fun reading to hear what you all have to say. And also, I just want to give thanks also to Mammoth Bakery and to Butterfly Herbs and to Freddie's Feed and Read for supplying the food. So thanks a lot.
I'm going to read tonight are about the people that make a home for me. When I looked through the poems that I wanted to read, it was all about the people that are in this place. So my first poem is called Fjords. My people are known for their depression, hypersensitivity to rejection, and acute awareness of pain. Many of us alcoholic. Each day I wake to a sense of dread, life, work, earth, and death. I try to get my bearings, but in my sleep I was clearing tables in Paris. My people drink coffee all day and are quiet in public, suspicious. They prefer to die alone on the ice. You must eat more fish, my doctor insists, but I prefer a bottle of painkillers, a purple hat, a paper bag full of cash, and a ticket to a French city. My ancestors are ice fishermen. Any one of them could have been eaten by a bear. I sit before a hole in the ice, line in hand. Madness, alcoholism, suicide. My people keep secrets at the cost of coherence. Tell them something personal or embarrassing, and they look away, nod, say, uh-huh, and that's all. Came home one winter night to Grandpa in the kitchen standing at a slant. He named each object with his finger. Peaches, potato, hot water, bread. A can of beer fell from his pants to pulse onto the floor. My people sleep too deeply to awaken. Lie on the couch drinking whiskey from a Pepsi can, escaping religion and poverty. I'm a realist. I believe in destiny. The world is feudal, fetal, fatal, brutal, total, half finished. The next poem is called The Loneliness of My Brother. This poem will be in Cut Bank's next edition, and it takes place in Minneapolis and my dreams. This is the loneliness of my brother. Today I saw a woman sitting alone, laughing at what she held in her glass. My brother laughs from behind a closed door alone in a room. This is the loneliness of my brother. I dreamt we quarreled. I picked him up and beat him against a brick wall until all that was left was a pair of pants. This, too, is the loneliness of my brother. I dreamt he was a boy, drunk, laughing and stumbling against me. I held him in my hands. He became a rabbit made of ice. I dropped him onto the sidewalk. He melted into a pool of water. How, I asked, can I tell our mother? I see him in the faces of transient men, in the fearful eyes of boys. I see him in my eyelids and muscles. I understand he is almost entirely alone. Imagine the loneliness of living on in the dream of your sister as a rabbit of ice and a pair of empty pants. I understand almost nothing about him. He keeps secrets. The only time he wants to talk about anything personal is when he's drinking. Our last conversation, he asked me if I'd considered suicide. This from the man who gets a pistol in his hand and plays roulette, passes out on his desk at work with a gun in his grip. Police break down the door. Everyone thought he was dead. Lies on my parents' bed, shooting holes in the walls and ceiling. This is the loneliness of the one who laughs alone. The woman looked like my brother, propped on the street preacher's arm, faded tattoos, red lips, and straggled hair. So pleased with everything, she laughed herself cross-eyed, pulled way inside and shrunk into a ball. On a shelf called Emotion stands a frozen figure, vomiting smoke. Something flies into my house. Black feathers swirl. I call the dogs inside and go looking. In the silence of the fiddlehead and the forsythia, I look for a body. Broken neck, I'd imagine. Tiny bones. Eggshell skull. But nothing is there. My mother told me that a bird flying into the window is a harbinger of death. A black bird, she said, will throw itself at your house. I used to fight for intervention and for detox. Now I only wait. 2. All I know is the summer went by. Suddenly the leaves are reddening. Ran into a local poet who referred to this suddenness and this deepening as the August singularity. Then he snaked his arm around my waist and grinned. Next night, the meteorologist refers to these brisk evenings as the third week anomaly. Well, I wonder if my tomatoes will succeed at presenting killer fruit, red as a shark's happiness. That black and white cat is back at the gate. She makes herself flat enough to slip underneath. 2 big dogs live at my house. She will risk her life for curiosity, or maybe she knows something winged lies hurt in my deep grass. The last poem I'm reading this evening is called Estate Sale. This is for my friend Arlene, who's 93 and had her life taken away from her and was put in a nursing home. Someone is taking her bowls down from the cupboard now and arranging them on a table. Her grandma baked biscuits from these bowls, and 3 of them will fit inside of each other. They are the color of ripe peaches. Every summer, her big-headed dahlias leaned from a vase shaped like a blossoming porcelain lily. A single white tuberose made the whole kitchen smell like a southern evening. They carried her from her house in November after she lay in the back hall for 7 hours, then gave her Zoloft so she could accept where old age had placed her. A week before the sale, my mother went inside the house to get a tan winter coat and some rings and pins. Every single thing sold, my brother says on the phone. Strangers paged through her bed sheets and linens, pillowcases embroidered by hand 50 years ago. I think of the blanket made of wool roses that Arlene used to pull over me when I napped on her couch. The heavy curtains that darkened the room had hung there longer than I have been alive. Her couch was a floral brocade where Skip the dog slept on his towel throughout my childhood. She wrote letters at a manual typewriter on a card table in a musty basement. When I was alone in Manhattan and afraid, she sent word to me of her dahlias and lilies, called me doll and kiddo, referred to herself and signed off simply by her last name, Griller. Asked if I was breaking hearts everywhere, said Take it easy on the Romeos out there. Now, 1,000 miles away on the day of her sale, I smell smoke. The smell of a pyre of belongings. Old objects that meant nothing to anyone but Arlene in that quiet house, year after year, bones deteriorating like old lace, and the only way we knew she was frail was that she kept falling. And my father kept finding her, each time thinking her dead, until he finally said he could no longer be responsible. When I called elder care agencies for information, they told me old people need to be protected from their own children. While Arlene lay dazed in the hospital bed, her son sold first her house, then everything else. When I think of the ad in the paper, estate sale, that was my estate. Saffron bedroom where I slept, rug porch, sunroom, sewing room, attic. It was my safe place to dream, been taken. Her world and my past inside each other like Russian dolls. Nothing ever changed in that house. Now, when I call Arlene, she says, my house has been taken in my dreams. The light from the windows is orange as fire. I am always walking toward it from out of the dark.
Pretend it works. What I'm going to read is an excerpt from an essay entitled Homecomings, which is about the numerous times I've come back to Missoula in various incarnations. And it was published in winter 1996 in Northern Lights. And the piece I'm going to read is toward the end of the essay, so I hope that excerpt makes sense. When I live in other places, in Amherst, Anchorage, Boston, and Palo Alto, I surround myself with things Western: oak grass from my family's cabin, colorful prints of William Reese's Blackfeet paintings, photographs of buffalo and coyotes, and one of my mother throwing a stick to two dogs romping joyously in tall bunch grass over the Bitterroot River. I tell stories about the Appaloosa that was tied up outside Connie's lounge, the mountain lions prowling university housing for preschool children, how some winters, when your life seems to have come to a dead standstill, you slink to the grocery store for a can of peas, and you run into some friend of your mother's who says, "Did I tell you about Melanie? She's in London, England. Isn't that fabulous?" That, I say, is living in a small town. I also tell people about the Shaker, the wall-eyed woman, a regular at the Top Hat, who danced each night alone, right under the stage, her good eye trained on the lead guitarist as her pelvis rocked back and forth as if she were humping the band. I tell them about the night some out-of-towner tried to force her to dance with him, moving in for what he thought was an easy kill, and I tell them about the regulars who surrounded him, then showed him the door. What I am trying to do is to recreate my landscape. When I say Missoula, Hellgate Canyon, Blackfoot, Pierce Lake, I am trying to explain myself, for my place haunts me. Its mountains, lakes, and prairies are also aunts and mothers. They are all part of me. The Apaches understood this long before me, for as Nick Thompson says of his land, even as we go far away from here to some big city, places around here keep stalking us. They keep on stalking you, even if you go across oceans. All the while, I wonder if I am doomed to love this place only when I live miles away from it. There is something else I want to tell them, but I can only describe it by its absence. From 1988 to 1992, Fred and I lived in California. People around us moved constantly. Moths ate my sweaters. Even the ground underneath us wasn't solid, as tectonic plates shifted and rippled under the Earth's surface. Accompanied by the constant mournful cooing of doves, life for me had a sad, shallow, frenetic feel. There, achievement was far more important than community. History was something everyone was trying to escape. It was a place where people spent a lot of time and energy reinventing themselves. I came there lured by these same things and excited by the wealth of opportunity. At the same time, this rootlessness filled me with a kind of nihilistic despair. Who was I so set apart from family and place? In Contrary Warriors, Hank Reelbird says the Crow word for lonesome means, I do not look like myself, and when you do not even look like yourself, that means you're lonesome, you're not even around, not even for yourself. In this place, however, something very important happens. I become a writer. My blushing narrator leaves me, and I begin the more serious work of retreating inward to recreate the place I long for. Then there's a space, and this is the end of it. It is dark except for a pale fringe of light to the east, where vagrant rays of sun smolder, then extinguish. The road crests at Lookout Pass, and my car plunges down into Montana, past tiny towns with names like Saltese, DeBorgia, St. Regis, and Superior. The air is cool, perfumed by larch that loom dark and silent over the road. At the smell, my dog rises in the back of the truck and wags her tail. At the smell, my heart races. Fuzzy white stars poke out of what is now a pitch-black sky. A moon rises slowly over the Bitterroot Mountains, humped in front of me. I am coming home. Next to me on the car seat, my mother is knitting. We talk easily now, but we usually keep to the surface of things, for these are our intimacies. I know now that she has always been my biggest ally. She was the one that fought for me to go away from school. She was the one that reads the books I read, the stories I write. She is trying to understand me. My husband, Fred, is ahead of me in a moving van somewhere on Interstate 90. We have been together for the last 13 years, married for 7 of those. Together, we have become writers, and we have lived and supported each other, somewhat shakily at times, through some of our best and our worst moments. My father is behind us, hauling the last of our boxes in a Thunderbird that once bore my great-aunt and uncle in great style. He is still the linchpin of the family, and I value in him the very thing I used to disdain. He is a man who gives everything to his family. This is the 3rd time I have come home for good. After 4 years away, I feel the hand of family once again closing around me. Coming home. I have done this countless times before. I move away, I return, but as always, I am terrified. As the car descends toward Missoula, my heart shrinks with fear at the thought of what I may become, expands at the thought of the things I have missed: sky, space, family, friends, even the vagaries of winter. Then the questions begin, questions I have asked myself 1,000 times. Is this my last homecoming? Is this a mistake? Is my life going to become pebble-sized, irretrievable? Is this courage, taking a stand and knowing my place in the world, or cowardice, a persistent fear of putting it on the line somewhere else? As we approach, the lights of town shine clear and steady and bright in the dark, and I wonder how many times I will break and reform this connection to the town where my great-grandparents came in 1900 for the sake of their son who sickened in the stench of the Chicago stockyards. Johnny, I have found a house on the banks of the Clark Fork River my great-grandfather rode his son, where we can skip stones and watch the ripples widen out forever. Thank you.
My name's Fred Hafley, and I'm going to read a piece that came out a couple years ago in Newsday magazine, and it's the format is a letter from Montana. A few weeks ago, my oldest daughter flew into Missoula from D.C., and when I picked her up, I said, "Well, Kirsten, what would you like to do now that you're here? We could go check out the Kaczynski arraignment in Helena, or we could drive over to Jordan and see how the Freeman standoff is going. I mean, it's your vacation, and it's up to you." It was a joke, of course, but like many of my friends, at first I took a kind of perverse pride in Montana's particular brand of celebrity. Certainly not because I espouse the causes of Uzi-slinging racists or sociopathic Luddites, but just because, living in a state with barely 800,000 people, how often do you get to hear the CNN anchor say, "Elsewhere in Montana today"? So for a while, the gags were fast and furious. Montana, where you're wanted, or Montana, the last best place to hide. Significantly, none of these seem particularly funny now. Things turned sour in a hurry, and helping us toward that end were the hordes of journalists who converged on this state like a hatch of black flies and began immediately to draw a stunningly perspicacious series of conclusions. 1, that the natural respect country people have for each other's privacy somehow equates to a kind of complicity. One columnist from Ohio suggested we didn't watch our neighbors closely enough. 2, that the unrelated incidents at Jordan and Lincoln proved beyond a doubt Montana is a kind of destination resort for every wacko, flip-top, and wind chime who ever had an axe to grind. We all know that's not true. 3, that the Jordan standoff and the Ted Kaczynski arrest are very likely a product of the fact that Montana has no legal speed limit. A good friend of mine drove past Kaczynski's cabin in Lincoln 2 weeks ago when the story was still breaking. He said there was a small army of journalists in the yard brandishing boom mics like medieval halberds and grimly laying siege to the place. Posted at the door was a single FBI agent who would only let them inside 2 at a time. And there was much jostling for position, and at one point the journalists were actually trying to out-credential each other in hopes of gaining preference. "Listen, pal," said one, "I should get in next. I've been to Rwanda." "Yeah," said another. "Well, I was in Rwanda and Oklahoma City." As if on cue, a rental tourist suddenly roared into view and bore down on the cabin, hit the brakes hard, and slid to a stop in the gravel. The doors flew open and 2 journalists bailed out, breathless. My friend said, "Hey, take it easy, you guys. I mean, you almost hit me." The driver replied, "Hey, we're on deadline, pal." Recently, my wife and I loaded our dog and our new baby into the family wagon and drove 80 miles east to have a look at whatever there was left to see in Lincoln. It's hard to overstate just how small a town it is. Situated on the west slope of the Rockies, roughly halfway between Missoula and Great Falls, Lincoln's claim to fame for years was the coldest recorded temperature in the lower 48. Before the arrival of the high country jerky works, and the main industries were outfitting and logging. Along those lines, it's worth mentioning that in 1979 I spent my first summer in Montana working in these same woods. It's also worth mentioning that at that particular time in my life, I was something of a fugitive too. A fugitive from an imploding marriage, from a career gone badly awry. To minimize expenses, my sawing partner and I decided to rough it, and throughout the work week we lived in a wall tent on site. After a couple days cutting timber, we would come into town for a beer, wild-haired and covered with dust and pitch. In the end, I suspect, we didn't look all that different from Ted Kaczynski. Nobody ever bothered us either. To that small town's credit, nobody even batted an eye. My wife and I stopped at Lambkin's restaurant in the center of town to get a bite to eat. And aside from some graffiti in the men's room that played off the term pipe bomb, things looked pretty much the same as they did 17 years ago. It was peaceful and convivial in Lambkin's, and my wife nursed the baby while we ate. I asked the waitress if it was still pretty crazy in town. She nodded emphatically. "Oh yeah, we got the boys and girls Class B basketball tournament going on." A heavy-set ranchwoman in shorts and Reeboks sat across the aisle from us and admired the baby. We began to talk, the way people do in small towns. At the mention of Kaczynski, she heaved a sigh and scowled. She told us that she got so tired of the out-of-towners' disappointment that she didn't know him, she began to tell everyone that she did. I'd tell them, "Hell yes, I used to shoot pool with Ted all the time." She shook her head. "People are so gullible. I mean, I don't know Ted, but sure, I knew who he was, all right. He was just another crazy old guy riding around on a bicycle." In a box by the register was a stack of freshly minted souvenir T-shirts featuring a tiny silkscreen of Kaczynski's cabin with a legend that seemed the soul of discretion. "Lincoln, mountain hideout of the suspected Unabomber." Nobody seemed to be buying them. By this point, the citizens of Lincoln appeared to have had quite enough of the press and Ted Kaczynski. Stemple Peak Road, the site of Kaczynski's cabin, is a right turn at the Conoco station in the center of town. I stopped there for gas, walked in to settle up, and grinned at the woman behind the counter. "So," I said, "where is it?" She took my money and without so much as a glance up, pointed off down the road. In the tradition of ghouls and rubberneckers the world over, I drove my family 3 miles down Stemple Peak Road in search of Kaczynski's cabin. It was a brilliant spring afternoon. Ranch families were out burning slash piles, and the smoke stung our eyes as we drove, searching for that now famous mailbox. But the mailbox was gone, uprooted for some crime lab, or to vex the curious, such as ourselves. All there was to see was a Jeep Cherokee parked across the Kaczynski Drive. Inside was a bored-looking female agent in a smart flannel shirt and high-top, lace-up boots that looked to be the J. Peterman Amelia Earhart model. I got out to ask how far up the drive we could go, and she told me we'd already gone that far. I can't say I was terribly disappointed, but I lingered a moment and tried to make small talk, like you might do with a neighbor, like we'd just done in the restaurant in Lincoln. But the agent wasn't from Lincoln. Not with boots like that, she wasn't. What's more, she wasn't interested in the baby or in the fact I'd driven all the way out there with my family. In fact, she gave the impression she'd seen my kind before. She'd seen me behind the yellow tape on the fringe of Lord knows how many crime scenes. She'd seen me through the eyes of CNN, 2020, Dateline, and the likes. She'd seen that I was another Yahoo from the sticks and that I bore a little closer watching. Thank you.
How do you do? I'm Patricia Gotica. And do I have to talk into it? No? Oh, okay. I'll sort of try. I came here from the East about, oh, my goodness, 1981, that's almost 16, 17 years ago. And I still feel, when I think about my home, which I consider Montana to be now, of it, I still think of it in terms of the earth, that we're closer to the land and to the earth as a whole here than I felt in the small confines back east, the smaller confines. And so, but I still want to, I can't help but feel, as everyone else obviously does, that the important thing about place, about the land that we live in, is the interactions between people and place, which is what this mapping project is all about. So I'm going to read 3 poems to you tonight, and the first one I want to read is from Annick Smith's wonderful contribution in defense of the now defunct, but hopefully someday to be resurrected, Clean Water Initiative. Do anybody remember that? Well, the anthology that she did was called Headwaters, and I have a poem in it called Along the Blackfoot. And in it, of course, we're rafting. It's summertime on the Blackfoot. But what I'm also interested in is the people on the land and the way we interact with the land in terms of the parallels that we see in it to our lives. In this case, obviously, river and mother. Along the Blackfoot. At 9 Mile Prairie, on the banks of the calm Blackfoot, clear, ambling fish concourse of gray, rust, bottle green, the pines stood around above us until we were waterborne. The lift under the buttocks like a hand, airy as clouds holding up the plain where you will sit tomorrow, flying to your mother's bedside and then back once more to this quiet, liquid twin of the paths our parents knew. The river rippling under our feet, though we're not doing anything, just hunkered here on the pillowed, rolled edge of the raft. Connections known, somehow known. Because the only way we can come as close as we can, which is not very close, to understanding the ultimately unknowable universe and to how our minds can possibly connect with it at all, with the kind of wordless, terrifying wilderness of physical experience we're all immersed in. The only way we can do that, the only thing that we have almost, is figurative language. The figures we make for it ourselves. So here's the poem. We're back in bear country. She has to write an essay or a letter. Say, I need you, and why. She reaches out for the words, and there they are. Poof. like an ant trail, picking its way among breadcrumbs with a mind of its own? Forget what the words refer to or don't refer to. She inches herself right along with them over the sliding talus slopes of the world. Whenever she needs them, they turn up like stepping stones in the wilderness. Who put them there? She thinks she chooses them carefully, from pitons left on a rock face, cairns full of dried berries. But the minute she stops walking, in the quiet after her own footsteps, hush! What's that crackling in the huckleberries bushes beside her? In bear country, she never stops talking to warn the bears away. But if all she can hear is herself, what are the bears doing? Ahead, on the narrow trail, what if one of them should rise up right in front of her with its hairy jaws open, its raw, dish-faced snout towering over her and snarling? Well, nothing. It's all in her head, for the moment. Still, what is this other irritable static that starts up in her? Is it only the drizzling hiss of extra low-frequency intracellular transmission? Like popcorn, filled with air and fast or slow as lava, woozy purple amoebae, fat blueberries with the silver lining of some storm clouds, or jellyfish, floaters she calls them, almost intelligible, torn shreds of meaning. Not bears, really, but still frightening to think about. Over the lost yips of wolves, the pebbles grating underfoot across the night, deep down in her brain sky, is it only chemicals firing? Sparklers splash the dark. In spicules of flaring light, they write their names on the air and disappear, even as she tries focusing on them, can't. So she goes back to scribbling, in short stabs or in long, leaning sentences, thin snow fences shivering. I want, I need something. The bears are waiting. What else can she do? She'll never make it. But high in the mountains, on a white, empty snowfield, from the shifting valley floor, every once in a while she can see them far ahead of her, a tiny line of ragged, roped together human figures where there were none before. And then the last poem is, fittingly enough, I guess, one that was published in The Last Best Place, our favorite anthology. And it also, fittingly, I think, is not about people and the landscape, people and places, about place without people, or that's what it's trying to be about. I don't know how I can make it be about that, but something about the sense of loneliness, of emptiness that comes with one of the things we really love about Montana, the big sky, the vastness that makes us aware that we're not the sum of our existence, of the world. The world is bigger than we are and means more, perhaps, than we do. And for me, it's somehow comforting, frightening, but soothing to think about that sometimes. The poem is called Lost. Miles from here, in the mountains, there is no sound but snowfall. The wind rubs itself against the trees, under its breath. If a crow calls, it is nothing. If a branch breaks, it is nothing. The birches look at themselves in the water. The long white poles of their bodies waver and bend a little. The yellow leaves of their hair, like pieces of far-off stars, come falling, hissing onto the lake that is smooth as pewter, that is clear and tranquil as an eye. lost up here in the mountains, as if someone had dropped it. But no, the pebbles beneath the surface have no nerves. They are calm. If a fish leaps, it is nothing. Surrounded by moss and blueberries, flowers breathe among the rocks so quietly you forget everything. Up here on the crusty grass, the bushes sparkle with ice, and no footprints anywhere. If a twig snaps, it is nothing, for nothing matters once you have lost it. Down here in the valleys among the people, the sidewalks are full of holes, faint memories of far-off lakes up there in the mountains. In the great evergreen forests, if a woodchuck whirs, it is nothing. If a blue jay shrieks, it is nothing. Pine needles slip from the trees. Silently, they pile up on the ground. Thanks for coming.
Hi, my name is Zan Bacchus, and although I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, I consider Missoula my home now. I've been here for 10 years off and on, and I think this is home because I keep coming back to it. Thomas Wolfe said you can't go home again, but I think your true home is a place you keep returning to, regardless of how often you leave. One of the things I love about Missoula is the supportive writing community. I workshopped this first poem in my writing group with Sheryl, Noethe, Beth Ferris, Judith Johnson, and Sandra Alcosser, all of whom have been extremely helpful to me. The last good, sweet pink wall for my mother. The two of us painted my bedroom the summer that never ended, when the soggy Nebraska afternoon rolled its lead-bellied clouds across the dull sky like a big machine. I'd chosen Puffin Bay gray in my cynical adolescent misery to replace the candy pink of former years. I rolled it on, covering large patches, while you, so much better at careful details, at the methodical attention required, painted the trim. You, always the diplomat, though displeased with my somber taste, kept disapproval far at the back of your throat and worked as though that morbid shade suited you just fine, as though you'd chosen it yourself. Perhaps I was only too eager to pass this right. I slapped those sweet pink walls, rolled them under coats of gray, as though ridding the room of all childhood sentimentality. No cooling breeze came from either window, and the sweat rivered from our faces, down our necks, between our breasts. You removed your T-shirt. I threw mine in the corner. Something suddenly happened. You slapped a paint-filled brush on my back, and I rolled a path across your chest. We traded swatches and stabs and slices, Puffin Bay over the pink of our skin. The paint slopped and sucked, squished and slid, a slick mud coating the hair on our arms, circling the roundness of our breasts. Ours was the vengeance of artists gone mad, the smell of latex and summer storms swelling in our nostrils. Paint and sweat and rain were one, like gleeful children, like children forever of children. We pressed our hands on that last good, sweet pink wall, the pall of gray darkening the room by degrees, like clouds over sun. I remember your reluctance to finish. I remember your back was tired. I remember how, for so long after that day, I tried to find answers. In my mind, that summer never left, even though you did soon after, even though, swallowed by the Puffin Bay gray sky and those colors that only loss can change. Spending winter days in Missoula inspired this next prose piece. Winter light on Orange Street. The desolation I stalk is always near at hand. Beyond this and every window, wind and snow. Missoula wears its dank, foggy coat like the shroud of Turin, meditatively brewing under gray felt in every bone. Burning somewhere above the sapphires, the sun disks the clouds under in a shining roll, turning in its gray bed. It is a day for wishing and walking, for watching that silver patch of sky fall into the empty pocket of evening. Orange Street churns and sighs with hard-shelled, glinting beetles zippering by in chains. I scuff along the snow-clumped sidewalk, headed for the bridge, wanting something somewhere else. On this day in another place, my father has a cold. My mother is no longer there to bring hot lemonade or run the bath. My brother is waiting tables in some other mountain town, recommending the finest wine to complement a lobster dinner, his pocket heavy with tips. The sodden sky dumps cold feathers on the unfrozen river, where the water slides by like flat scenery on a train, like blue rooms at night seen from a passing car, like the artist's rendition of nothing, or as close as he can get. Those chilly crystals skin my face. Deep down my heart warms with spirit for those I love. Lances of light link us all. Far away a train mourns its passing, and I no longer wish to follow. Beneath my torn garage sale coat and shapeless knitted hat, I surge through icy light like a schooner through a sea of icebergs, living with a vengeance, gripping the lining with fists jammed deep against loss. I've spent a lot of time on Greyhound buses, going home, going back to school, traveling around the country. So I'm going to dedicate this next poem to the Greyhound Bus Company. It's called Greyhound Villanelle. I watch the sun burn circles in the sky and see the minutes vanish in the air. The bus groans onward, miles are spinning by. I've swallowed moonlight sliced like ice cream pie above the western mountains. I've been there. I've watched the sun burn circles in the sky and seen too many cities wane and die. The highway passes through them, unaware. The bus groans onward, miles are spinning by. I try to sleep, but only shut one eye. The low, long drone of voices strums my ear. All day the sun burns circles in the sky. In little towns the families wave goodbye. The old men sit on benches, children stare. The bus groans onward, miles are spinning by. I sit and feel so small, ask, who am I? The other voices murmur like a prayer. I watch the sun burn circles in the sky. The bus groans onward, miles are spinning by. I wrote this last poem shortly after I moved here, after I had a fight with my best friend in Omaha. Long distance from somewhere in Montana. Through the fuzz of miles, your voice brings me home with that one high bird note of hello. I've been seeing you through dusty windshields, through streaks of rain that gray the empty page of the sky. I've been seeing you lounging along the backs of mountains and entire gas stations behind cans of 10W30, but you never turn your head. I am the one you wouldn't want to hear from, the one who turned my face from yours back when inches in proximity made the moment possible. So I say nothing, wanting only to hear the cool thread of your voice echoing, hello, hello? Now I know you're still there. I break the connection, holding in my ears your shred of sound, while blue and red veins on the map cross my eyes, making me lost forever. Thank you.
I'm Carly Taylor, and I have two poems about home. That's such a crazy word. What is home? Home is like inside of you and outside of you and around you, and you can't go back to it, or can you go back to it? I don't know. I'm confused. And this kind of reflects that I'm confused. It's called Triggering Town Poem, that was inspired by Dick Hugo. He wrote this book, The Triggering Town Poem, The Triggering Town, and I read it and I was inspired to write about my obsession but hide behind something else, which is Butte, what I'm hiding behind. In Butte, polite cars can't count. They assume the obvious. The sign reads 2 cheeseburgers, .99 cents, so they pay $1. If you don't understand the joke, you must be from Butte. I beg Sandy K, I plead with Ronnie M to know why I rant down 6th Avenue as they flip burgers, making enough money to go to Starship Warriors on Friday night. And in this one, I was inspired by the woman that read right before the last one about the Blackfoot River. I thought that was neat. So I had this poem and I thought I should read it. It's called You in the Summertime. I live up at Garnet Ghost Town, and there's a creek that runs through Garnet Ghost Town, and I like to put my feet in there in the summer. You were cold in the summertime, perfect for my feet, blistered from walking, blistered from the ghosts, wrapping around my ankles, forcing me into a cabin, in and out, into the sunshine, summer. You were made to sit on over the creek so cold, the houses a ghost's breath away. You apologize for the splinters in my rear. I apologize for the creak of your age. But what isn't old? What isn't whispering? Gray creek, gray house, gray feet, gray footbridge. Thank you.
Hello. I'm Linda Wadowik, and I think I'm just going to read 2 Missoula poems. They're actually quite similar. In them I talk about mud and being in the valley and water, and they were all written during very cold seasons. And I grew up in Montana. I grew up in Great Falls, but I consider this more my home. I've lived here a little over 5 years, and I think of this as home just because I always loved it here, and this is where I kind of made my own life. So this is called Record. The coldest January in years leaves the town breathing quick through scarves. Cars turn paralytic in the night, diamond-thick stars of frost on glass. Thaw chokes the ground with mud, whole sections of road blocked for rising water. A student ends up in the river one morning, name withheld, and by noon the shoals of ice thud heavy, crushed with hammers. On cigarette break, I hear cannon blasts from the bank. 5 days turns up nothing. Rescue workers shake their heads and give up. It's a scam, my friend says over whiskey. He probably skipped town on a train. Smog collects in the valley, covering our skins. On every street, ruined winter gardens darken and swell, impatient, gorged on rain. I was looking through stuff before I came that I thought might be appropriate and be sort of in the theme of celebration, and all my stuff just sounds so depressing and horrible. It's not really to me, but you know, I don't know. This next one is I've lived in many different residences here in Missoula, including one on the north side, which is a very bizarre territory. And so this is this is about the closest thing to a kind of gentle reminiscence I get. This is kind of a year-end poem. I just called it 1995. This season, we've had lots of rain in the valley. The river is swollen and choking on mud. I moved into a house at the north end of the city. April tells me some mornings she hears retching sounds from the next one over. It's early when this happens, just before the sun comes up over the highway. Already we've neglected the yard and filled the sealed-up rooms with smoke. The cats we aren't supposed to have play all day. They crawl over the table when we eat. The dark one, mine, she's intense. She'll pace and stare at nothing or watch me. 2 blocks away, the tracks moan, and trains roll in, squealing from the weight of metal. When it's quiet, when you sit inside, the sound is imperceptible. It's like a heartbeat you feel more than hear. One night we lit some fireworks left from July. The rocket shot up and burst white, a spectral veil throwing light down the block. Later on, after midnight, an ambulance came. 2 men took my neighbor down the walk and put him inside. In the morning, I saw dog tracks in the yard. New snow covered my half-dead car like ash. Boys working for the management come by to haul away boards and shreds of carpet. We watch them, then day fades out. Somewhere, someone is listening to voices on the radio. Somewhere, a man goes into a bar with tips, counting from 10, blood thick in his legs and back. Money's low. Rick moves into the extra room. He brings lots of kitchen stuff and 2 more cats. I stay up late with him and hear stories about the South, the dark, heavy heat down there. On Bourbon Street, he tells me, they all go crazy at night. I lick salt from my fingers in the bright yellow kitchen. I lie down on the lawn and my sad friend covers my body with leaves. He puts them under my head. I want to stuff great fistfuls of leaves in my mouth. I will walk for hours in fog from the rain and city smoke, past the rail yard, the broken bodies of trucks covered with rust. April goes terrible rounds with her lover on the porch. They hit and cry and fall asleep curled around each other. She thinks about dying, of being torn apart by beauty, how one day she'll climb up and out and never look back. I go to bed suddenly, making no sound, getting the lights. It's December. The year ran through me too fast. I met devastated people drinking alone on Tuesdays, their warm, dreamy voices making diamond mist outside, and I thought, forgive me, all of you, for what I have done in desperation, for this hunger rearranging my life. I confess I was paralyzed in the face of it. The words, the eyes, the beat-up hearts, the reflection in glass. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mary Liz, and I'm a Vermonter. And I've been away from home for 5 years, and I miss it. And maybe this would put it in perspective for you. From the Canadian border, south to Massachusetts, Vermont is all of 165 miles long. At the top, the wide end, it's 80 miles across. At the bottom, where I live, it's 35 miles across. It's just a bend in a road for you. But it was my home, it is my home, and it was enough. In doing this project, I've learned it will always be my home, but never again will it be enough. I'd like to say 2 poems for you. One I wrote when, forgive me, all I'd ever seen of Montana could fit in Vermont. That was from the Flathead down to Hamilton. So now that I've seen a little more of Montana, I would never have the nerve to write a Montana poem, but here I was, so naive, that I took on writing a Montana poem. Where I am, ravens ride the night wind down Hellgate Canyon. Wolves travel through the secret light of the missions, and golden eagles fish the clear waters of the Blackfoot. Along the Rattlesnake, trees swing heavy with wax wings drunk on the juice of the rowan's red berry, while up the Bitterroot, settlers in fields with no fences band together to resist the return of the grizzly. Where I was born, mountains are old, forests tame. I have no history here on the banks of the Clark Fork, where the waters flow west from opportunity to the sea. All my rivers flow east to the Adirondacks, Mount Monadnock, Katahdin, Cape Cod, and the Green Mountains of Vermont. And then I wrote another poem, but that was 10 years ago, and it's called Vermont. I came to this glacial valley a flatlander from away. I've lived here more than half my life, among generations of Vermonters bound by the granite green mountains and the meandering water of the Connecticut River. Thin soil supports sparse vegetation in fields with rocks emerging like the bones of a wasted old woman. We are terse, plain-spoken, our faces furrowed by the elemental forces which keep us all alert. The weather which shapes this land shapes me now, a changeable woman on the verge of winter, tenacious, outspoken, with the rough edges jutting out in defiant relief. Thank you.
Hi, I'm BJ. I moved here from Wyoming, and I'm a Wyoming native, which are almost as rare as people like Carolyn, who's a Missoula native anymore. And I felt very much not at home when I moved here. And I had a difficult time, in spite of the fact that I came here to be with someone that I love very much, that I felt that God had sort of lost in the mail for 40 years and finally caught up with. And so when I was thinking about reading, I tried to think about both similarities and differences between my old home and my new one, and I wanted to read you a poem from each place. In Montana, all the controversies, many of them seem to ride around cutting trees or not cutting trees. Where I come from, all the trees are down by the creeks where they belong, where they're not in anybody's way, and all the controversies are about cutting fence or not cutting fence. And I lived out in the middle of nowhere, 60 miles from any town, 35 miles from my nearest neighbor, 40 miles from the nearest yard light. Say anything because she's crazy. And she got bored with herself a few years ago and started to develop multiple personality disorder. And in this one, she's pretending to be Saint Teresa, the one who said to work is to pray. Mad Alice as Saint Teresa, mending fence near Powder River. Last winter's sea of snow pulled all the fences down in the sheep pasture, and now the woven panels sag slack-bellied, like those ranchers who got through the cold on bacon, whiskey, biscuits, too much beer. Sub-zero dark clenched barbed wire so tightly that when warm comes like this, all radiant too fast, steel sings and sparks and snaps and curls. A solid thunderbolt pulls the staples out of cedar posts and sends them flying. Pray that you're not near it when it goes. I want to sing myself. It should be this way. Walls brought down by a joy palpable in the air. No obstacle to halt the deer, the antelope, coyote, nothing in their way. The path on the ground as clear as the one their hearts know. Even the cows would manage. Already they walk through any fence they want to simply by forgetting that it's there. They see the greener on the other side and go. Of such deliberate vision, saints are made. But sheep, the sheep would falter. They'd stand on the two-lane asphalt, watching nervously as trucks bore down on them, but not be quite so nervous as to move in time. They'd bed out on the railroad tracks or rush to baptize themselves, a white multitude thronging into the muddy river 2 weeks before shearing time. And though, and I'm sorry, lost. 2 weeks before shearing time, and not know enough to come out. Saved, but far too waterlogged to save themselves. How woven wire or barbed can penetrate the clouds of ecstasy they're caught in, I don't know. But come to it, they'll turn so easily in one direction or another, it's as if a way made straight were not worth going in. This afternoon I'll stretch the fences tight and high again, make whole what's broken. Deer will still fly over, closer to God and leaping than I shall ever be. Coyote will go through or under, praising the Creator for his cleverness in making all coyotes clever. For myself, I long to see this grass go on unbounded to the sky's blue edge. I want an end to difficulties, to having to climb over, to tearing my skirt. I want the road easy. But the sheep who know so little know what fences are for, and it's for them I'm going. Praise the pickup if it starts. Praise stretcher, cutter, staples, hammer, great unwieldy bales of wire, smashed thumbs and cuts and sunburn. Praise this work by means of which the sheep and I can make our crooked way. And then this one, that poem was published in Leaning into the Wind, which is a wonderful anthology. It's the embrace of a lover whose wish for more arms, was granted, and entwining around and into and between, a planting of one flesh so firmly into another that each becomes forever something other than itself. What's wood? What's granite? The shovel can't tell when it rings against them in the sweet darkness of the earth. It's what we wish for, to be as solid and as sure against any wind or storm or drought or summer furnace, to stand, to be in such perfect balance that even God won't know which body falters, which is anchor. Neither. Both. But it's over. I think of you digging stones out of the sandy earth under pine trees, your labor, the effort of your desire, your deep wish for level ground. You become, hefting that steel bar, a man who might make the planet move if only he could find a place to stand. Still, this tree has withstood you and the metal help of winches and sworn prayers. The roots go too deep, the stones too heavy. All that's left to try is fire and a long summer of waiting. Green pine stumps burn slow. Perhaps the heat will crack the rock and you can pry it out in pieces, or enough wood will go to ash and carbon and let go with some great deep sigh of surrender. Afterwards, there will be an emptiness to fill. Come to me then. I'll be tree and you be stone. And under the lovely weight of wavering and holding fast, we'll bear each other down. Felling the pines. 2 lodge poles holding up a tent of sky, but one leaned at a precarious angle, and we had need for a roof not made of air. A man takes his bearings on the compass points of dark and light to gauge the direction of his fall. It isn't only virtue's way that's narrow, and the chainsaw whine becomes a kind of lamentation, a keening, a gnashing of teeth. What we remember is the silence after. Severed limbs, twisted spine, the stove-length logs scattered in the shadows like the vertebrae of giants unfleshed before we were born. And the new nakedness of sky up there, the moon and its too open face. Later, the pile of lopped branches will be home to beetles and ground squirrels and chipmunks. We cradle the cordwood against our bodies, carry it the way we carry our kin before they learn to bear themselves. 2 lodge poles to make a wall that's higher than my head beside the outdoor fire pit. We cook hot dogs there and ponder the mysteries of heaven. Summer shade, autumn windbreak, winter fire. The same, dead or alive. We'll learn it too at the end. All flesh is grass or fragrant wood, and nothing burns hotter than bone. Thanks.
My name's Dave Thomas. I grew up on the High Line, but I've been living around here for about 30 years. And I've been working and wandering and carrying on around here for most of that time. I graduated from the university so long ago that it doesn't really matter anymore. But anyway, I've written a lot of poems, of which I'll just read a few tonight, about just living here in Missoula, mainly. This first poem is kind of recognizes a minor tragedy that occurred this summer. It's called Requiem for Stoverood's Timepiece. Crumpled on the sidewalk, the old clock lies shattered in morning light and shadow. The news photographer addresses the scene as he would a battlefield. Casualty of a tractor trailer meant for the store across the street. Its face and hands greeted me, tardy or punctual, coming off Higgins Bridge or rounding Front Street on the way home. All of Missoula guided by its works. Nearly 100 years, a jewel decorating the entrance to the Florence. History in old Oz wound its springs, and now it lies a jumbled destruction, sheared off at its base by an ignorant eye. Veteran of Hellgate winds stalling its gears, freezing its hands until the snow's dug out, the clouds open, and the sun frees the face into movement again. A twist of human muscle, drift of brute machine, and it's gone. The square hole laid bare by the leaving, mute testimony to the feet that scurry by. A couple of years ago, I was looking for a little bit different perspective, so I decided I'd climb up Waterworks Hill for a change. I hadn't been up there in a long time. I think probably the last time I'd been up there before this was in somebody's car drinking beer. It's called A View from the North. A week before spring shows on the calendar, and there's still a frosty bite in this breeze. I'm sitting on Waterworks Hill, first time in years. It's always been near at hand, but Greeno Park usually proves a stronger lure. I can see the water tower at the fort shine in midday sun. My window in the Montane apartments, a tiny rectangle. The open pit where once the old roundhouse stood, the plume of the Frenchtown mill. A jogger passes on the trail below my perch. The university with all its roofs and parks cars, the passing shadows of stately cloud, new shoots of grass, tender green by my boots, the courthouse clock and I-90 going to and fro, Black Mountain, Blue Mountain, Lolo cloud hidden, Squaw Peak too, Jumbo and Sentinel guard my left shoulder. Once again I climb down and rejoin the fray. I was working a job as a casual laborer out on Highway 10 West a few years ago, and most of my crew went into town for lunch, and they had to pick up some extra material, so they were a little late getting back, and they left me out there with my little notebook and my pen. And I I wrote this little poem called West of Missoula. Once all this flourished with grass, camas in the spring, maybe a stray bitterroot might bloom. But now the concrete trucks idle as the pump truck moves mud and the finishers work their trowels. This slab will be headquarters for a trucking outfit when the last bolt is tightened, the final nail set. The blank screen of the Go West drive-in obscured by fog all this November morning, a frosty, chilly finger and toe-biting fog. Now, just after lunch, the sun burns through, high up Snowbowl, its bright blue sky. Down here, fog drifts along the fresh, graded dirt of yet another parking lot. Off in the distance, huge steams of the Frenchtown mill, a faint smell of sulfur. I suppose this poem's about change as much as anything. So that I kind of live in the neighborhood of the old Intermountain Mill, and one day a few years ago I was out for lack of anything better to do, just out wandering around, and decided I might write about this before it became completely inaccessible. Called the Intermountain. The corpse of this old mill sits quiet, but the days when it breathes smoke around the clock are an easy reach for my memory. The log yard piled full of fallen trees, waiting the whine of the saws, the clank and rattle of the green chain. A crow's caw breaks the dull roar of traffic around town. A hint of sun atop Lolo Peak, stark as the bare river trees, this gray December. Nothing but wood chips turning to mulch and yellowed weeds populate this graveyard of machinery. Fresh tire tracks, a prowl car maybe. The no trespassing signs lie face down by the railroad bridge. I can hear the Clark Fork's faint whisper beneath the drone of a single-engine plane. Trees grow slow in this climate, and money moves fast to smoke. I'll finish up with this one that I wrote a few years ago. This is as a kind of a reminiscence and sometimes I need to find a place where you can be by yourself for a while, and it's called an old hideaway. Trains can still be heard, and I-90 hums along, but here in the trees on Mount Sentinel's backside, I'm alone. Labor Day sweat stains my cowboy shirt, and down at the heel boots are not the best for climbing. The trail's well blazed, I know it in my heart. Years ago I'd take my troubles and youthful lust up these slopes, trail or no, bushwhacking my confusion until exhausted I'd climb down to the Milwaukee tracks and Eddie's Club beer. Now Eddie's Club has gone beyond itself and the Milwaukee history. Once the Blackfeet ambushed the Flatheads traveling to the buffalo range from these shadows that now study the bare dance of sunlight on needles of pine and fir.
Hi, I'm Jessie Childress, and I'm going to read a poem about home. I see home, I guess, as lots and lots of different things, like houses and the future, and this one is about my body as a home. Okay. If my physical flesh had to choose one color to represent everything she stands for, she'd call a timeout and walk through her rooms. She'd sit in the armchair of my heart and ponder how to choose, like redecorating a house in one color and knowing it had to encompass everything. This home, with so many rooms, hallways that echo, walls both soft and rough. Curves that Twiggy would disapprove of, wide shoulders, calloused hands, all the textures that I am composed of. Walking through her room, she'd find freedom pacing, silence sleeping. Humor would greet her in the hallway, honor would ask her in for coffee. All of these, with their blending of sounds and colors, would assemble. Anger would begin to debate forgiveness, passion would reassure doubt, green would meditate with blue. All of them, melting into each other, colors seeping and absorbing, giving each of them an array of colors she knows only as the rainbow that is me.
Well, if Montana has a sense of place, Southern California, where I grew up, is truly the sense of placelessness. I saw vast tracts of chaparral, miles and miles just bulldozed, and the vernal pools that animals could drink fresh water out of, just backhoes filling them in. And it didn't seem odd to my sister and I that when we grew up, we just moved into our pickup trucks and just drove off across the freeway, the new east-west link, and just searched for wilderness areas wherever we could find them. And finally, I landed here in Montana and met my husband and had a daughter, and we bought a house. And I feel like this is now my home. So I had to hang up 2 pieces on the mapping home board. The photograph of Patrick and Mary at our house seemed to just suffice, but I have so many words for my childhood home. It seems like they just keep coming and coming. And I just culled a few of them from an essay I've been writing called California Farming. When I was 11, my home was a white 2-story house surrounded by orchards on one side and a row of plaster condominiums on the other. The house had beautiful crystal doorknobs, lots of windows, and a funny floor plan with the kitchen and living room upstairs. Thick weeds filled my sister's downstairs bedroom window, whereas the front door opened out on a broad landing at the top of a flight of stairs trellised in morning glory vines. I remember hundreds of midnight blue blossoms interlacing the green wooden steps and railings. Late at night, I'd slip past the chicken coop and avocado trees to empty garbage in the condo dumpsters. From the upstairs windows, I could see a slate blue wedge of ocean and the grandstands of the Del Mar racetrack. In the other direction, past the ancient bull pine and the cactus lady's broken down fence, sat Eden Gardens, a Mexican barrio where my friend Lupe lived with her 7 brothers and sisters in a small house tucked between wide-leaf banana trees. Her mother swept dirt into a hole in the floor and covered it with a ceramic tile. On Christmas, her family received boxes of canned goods from St. James Catholic Church, the same church we rented our house from. At the beginning of each month, I'd carry a check or one of Mom's long explanatory notes up the hill to the Monsignor's office. He'd make me stand beside the red leather chairs facing his desk while he penned a response to my mother. I usually brought my goat Lucy, short for Lucifer, and tied her to the fence beneath his window. She'd cry and cry until she found a tender bush to munch on. I never felt bad about her foraging in the church gardens because the Monsignor had his own plans for destruction. He wanted to build a back road to the sanctuary, which meant tearing down our house as well as the neighbors and bulldozing through the avocado orchards. He remained patient with my family's flexible payment schedule because he intended to evict us as soon as the city approved of his project. A fortunate zoning dispute gave us 3 years on the farm, our name for the small patch of paradise we called home. When the notice finally came, we had to give away Lucy and the other animals, a UCSD medical research cow named Stitches, a hen house full of chickens, 3 Angora long-hair rabbits, and a scruffy but lovable dog named Sage. We moved to a mustard-colored duplex right off the highway. Not long afterwards, Mom got a job as a flight attendant, moving to Denver, leaving my sister and me to fend for ourselves while she served peanuts and cocktails. I've been searching for home ever since. Thanks.
I'm Henrietta Goodman. I'm going to read from a nonfiction work in progress. It's long, so I'm going to read just a few pieces from the beginning. I've lived here since 1991, but I grew up in North Carolina, and that's where this takes place about 11 years ago. Sometimes I believe I understand the loneliness an adopted child might feel, a loneliness born in the unmoored blood that lives in the body until the body is gone. I know this can't be true. Many adopted children are perfectly happy. They do not all commit suicide, as John did. But that feeling of being born into the wrong family, the wrong place, the wrong time, even the wrong body, who hasn't felt it? John was born on January 20th, 1972, and was adopted 3 months later, in mid-April, by the Warnock family, who had 2 girls of their own and an assortment of foster children. I've often wondered what happened during those 3 months, just as I have wondered about the several months preceding his death. I wonder if some essential bonding between he and his birth mother, or between he and Mrs. Warnock, should have occurred then and didn't, and if this might explain at least something. I don't believe the whole explanation, if there is one, could be that simple, but I know the fact that John was adopted made it easier for the Warnocks 15 years later to give him up, to give him back to the court system he had come from. If he had been truly theirs in the most elemental way, I don't believe they could have done it. I met John a week before I graduated from high school. I was 16. I worked in a fast food restaurant called the Shrimp Boat, a building shaped like a small orange-roofed barn on Franklin Avenue, Gastonia's main drag. We served shrimp and oysters and fish and every other variety of seafood, but the Shrimp Boat was and still is famous for its fried chicken, which soaked in a marinade of salt and watery pink chicken blood in open rubber garbage bins until the pieces were fished out, coated with flour, and dumped into the fryers. My friend Sarah worked there also, and Roy, the owner, called us both punk rocker. Coming from him, it was a term of endearment. He didn't care what we looked like, as long as we took orders and wiped tables and mopped up the greasy floor at night. Before I shaved one side of my head, I asked Roy if he would mind. "Girl," he said, "I don't care. What the hell are you asking me for?" The afternoon John came into the Shrimp Boat, the sun was shining hard through the front windows, bouncing off the cars and asphalt and heating the building like a sauna. The air conditioning was broken. We had propped the doors open, and the flies came in and piled up in black drifts on the windowsills. Sarah and John had already met in the record bar at the mall, where Susan and Sherry and Sam worked, where everyone went to browse through the import bin and hope some kindred spirit might come along. I think it went like this. Jennifer met John there one day, and a few days after that, when Sarah went in to buy a Smiths album, she met them both and took them to Charlotte for the afternoon. Jennifer was an opportunist. She thought Sarah was a dingbat, a weirdo even among weirdos. Behind her back, she called her crotch cricket, but Sarah had a car and Jennifer didn't. Sorry. Can I say that? That's a terrible thing to... Am I saying that on TV? The next day, while Sarah and I were working, Jennifer and her friend Pam and John came in the Shrimp Boat. They sat in the booth by the door and ate French fries. They were loud, and they made a big mess of the table with salt and pepper and ketchup and Texas Pete hot sauce, and when they left, John had the ashtray in his pocket. He left Sarah a note written in ketchup on a napkin. "Sarah, this is my last goodbye. I'm going to kill myself. Love, John." Sarah laughed her loud laugh and held it up to me, the ketchup dripping and starting to tear the paper. "He's crazy," she said. "He sure is a character." She tossed the note into a full trash can, and we carried the bag out to the dumpster together so it wouldn't drag along the gravel and rip. Sarah never took anything seriously. I knew the napkin was a joke, but as I heaved the bag up into the dumpster, I felt a twist of uncertainty. I took everything seriously. John liked to take pictures, but he didn't like to be photographed. When I looked for pictures of him last summer, I found one of his foot in a black Converse high top, and one taken by Jennifer a few days before I met him. In it, he is sitting on a metal folding chair in the middle of his backyard, a lit cigarette between his fingers. Pam has dyed his hair black, and now she is spiking it with Knox gelatin. She's almost finished. It's a profile shot, his head bent forwards. His hair, shaved on the sides, stands up in a row of wet spikes. He's wearing an orange t-shirt and ripped jeans, his go-to-hell pants, the holes laced up with shoestrings. He looks amused and a little skeptical. My mother used to tell me he looked like Elvis, but I couldn't see it then. Elvis stood for every trashy and tasteless element of the South I wanted to escape. Now I can see it. Not Elvis in his later days, but young, his smooth cheek and pouting lips, feminine features that add up to a strangely masculine face. Smoke is rising from John's cigarette. He does not look 15. On the night of my high school graduation, I was supposed to go to the beach with my friend Mary Alger, but instead I went to the Waffle House with John. I don't think Mary ever completely forgave me, and I don't really blame her. Overnight, I turned into a girl who'd cancel plans on a moment's notice. For what? Not even a date. But already with John, I felt a strange necessity. I couldn't leave, not even for a few days. We graduated, Sarah and Mary and I, and then we picked up Jennifer and went to Sarah's house. Among my graduation pictures, I have a picture of myself in Sarah's bedroom, in front of her cluttered dresser. Nothing has happened yet. In a few minutes, we're going to pick up John. I'm wearing a summer dress covered with tiny pale flowers. Someone has said something to make me laugh, and I'm leaning forward from the waist, my eyes squeezed shut, my mouth wide open. I look like a baby bird in a nest, eager for food, eager to fly. I look nothing like the freak I thought I was.
My name is Shanley Swanson, and I was born in my room of my house, and I live in Ovando, but since I've lived there all my life, I sort of feel like there's more places for home than I can write, so I wrote about something that is my home, but I don't really feel as connected to it as I should. It seems my home is this: a body, sometimes graceful, sometimes clumsy, a body that has been alive 14 years. My soul must have been alive a lot longer than this body of mine. I watch myself grow up through the pictures. These are the only evidence that I exist, that I live. I watch myself grow into my home. Why is it that after 14 years I still have to run my hands along the wall before I find the light switch? This bothers me. I've trained this body. I've trained myself to play these fingers across the strings of my violin until suddenly music appears. I've trained myself to know that this is my home. This is where I am, where I will be. When I look in the mirror, I know I've changed somehow. The face staring at me is not the one I left reflected in the mirror last I looked. Then I remind myself that my home is the same. It may be my soul that has changed. My body is my home, and I am on the inside, alone. I stand at the window, my face pressed against the glass. Can you see me?
I'm Christy Odom, a long-time Missoula resident. In fact, I was born here. The first poem I will share with you is The Angelus, which was printed in On and Off Broadway. And it's about a very famous painting, often reproduced and hanging in schoolrooms, of a peasant couple pausing to pray, and I married it to Missoula. The Angelus. Brush strokes on canvas reveal a peasant and his wife at dusk, pausing in response to pray to the urging of a bell in a distant steeple. Jean-Francois Millet created this masterwork, which hangs in the Louvre. A hemisphere away and more than a century later, residents of the salad bowl of Missoula express the same reverence. When the sudden beating of helicopter blades stirs up the air, it is a sign that life flight is leaving or arriving. Ever at the ready, St. Pat's nurse, pilot, and medic work in tandem to meet the needs of patients far away. At the sound of life flight, many individuals stop what they're doing to bow heart and head to ask for success of a rescue mission. And here's one of my early poems called To My Horse. To starlit eve, my own true love, my own show horse, my partner and friend, I saw you as you came forth from Dixie's womb. You were encased in silvery membrane which mother tore open, and then you lay in straw. Dixie turned her head to look at you with recognition in her eyes and whinnied the soft and holy sounds of ancient maternal rapture. You thrived and grew up on our farm. When you were 2, we sent you to a trainer to learn to be a show horse. You learned your lessons well, and I have a wall of trophies and ribbons from our days in the show ring before the judges and spectators. Now you are gone. I cried when I heard that Papa had you put to sleep. I am sad no longer, for I believe that you wait for me and that you will carry me into paradise. Here is one for the 4th of July called Patriot Song. One can gauge the wind's velocity and direction by observing flags on poles in the open out of doors. Flags are flown at half-staff in times of local sorrow, when it is time for goodbye or Godspeed. Alabaster, indigo, and scarlet are the colors we claim as a national heritage. When the atmosphere is calm, the flag rests in a gentle spiral around the pole. If the breeze is moderate, the colors waft to and fro, back and forth. When the winds are mighty and changing, the flag flaps significant and free. I lost my mother a while ago, and let's see. Oh, yes. Pearl, 1905 to 1995. Jaundice arrives scrawling its sallow signature across her body, causing an insistent itch impervious to the mildest of lotions. Cancerous tumors feast with grim intensity. They pig out on vital organs. Digestion, metabolism have gone awry, and she is but a wraith. Her candle flame of life flickers, subsides to a feeble glow. Wax becomes an icy surface, while underneath the waters gently flow, bound for the Columbia, ultimately to the Pacific, where pearls are harvested.
I'm Tommy Youngblood Peterson, and I appreciate being here. Thanks for inviting me. And I appreciate the project, too. I wrote this little bit in response to it. It's obviously, home is obviously very important to all of us. I think, very elemental. One of the elements, it's air and water and ground. It's a real basic part of us. So it's very important. I thank you for recognizing that and bringing it out to us. This is called This Place of Home. In the universe, consisting of all matter, light, and energy, of everything that exists anywhere in space and time. In this galaxy we call the Milky Way, one galaxy of about 100 billion galaxies in the observable universe, grouping 100 billion stars in a giant spiral, 100,000 light years across, of which our sun is one star. The solar system of 9 planets, located about 3/5 of the way from the center to the edge of the Milky Way. On our Earth, being the only planet in our solar system to support life, 93 million miles from our sun, and at least 4.5 billion years old. This continent on Earth we call North America, and country of United States. This state, Montana, created by government in 1889, the only state drained by river systems that empty in the Gulf of Mexico, Hudson Bay, and Pacific Ocean. And now in this valley we call Missoula, a flat-haired word meaning by the cold, chilling waters. For we are located by the Clark Fork River, part of the Columbia River system, with rivers adjoining called the Bitterroot and the Blackfoot, and creeks called Paddy, Rattlesnake, Butler, and Grant. Missoula, at the confluence of 5 valleys, 3,300 feet in elevation, we call home. Where in winter you can see from downtown streets elk on Mount Jumbo, the elk descending from the Rattlesnake Mountains, crossing Jumbo's Saddle and on to the southwest side of the mountain, the clearest side to forage. And last winter in deep snows, those same elk wandering Missoula neighborhoods, scratching for food in our own yards. They always came down. Where mountain lion tracks up Patty Canyon and even down near Patty and Higgins are not uncommon. Where in late December, my wife spotted 3 white-tailed bucks, one an 8-point, leaping over an alley fence for the apple tree on the other side, a block from our home. I call this place home, where on Christmas Eve, our family receives not 1, but 2 calls from kind Missoulians blocks from our house, each caller telling us they have returned our dog back inside our fence. And on New Year's Eve, we return at 1 a.m., late after first night, to find 4 messages on our answering machine from another family. Father and young daughter alternating calls. We have your friendly dog. Call us when you return. When we call back at 1 a.m., apologizing for the late hour, the father replies with merry Santa-like laughter and, "No, don't come for the dog. We know where you live. We will return her for you." This place, Missoula, where children turn their faces skyward, full of wonder, at a flock of hundreds of female grosbeaks swarming the air like bees, landing in mountain ash trees, then quickly swooshing upward in unison, then diving down towards the children, the screams of delight, the laughter. And the light of this valley, early winter mornings gracing Snowbowl and Lolo Peak with the day's beginnings, the orange and cream-like light, dreamsicle-like on the white snows, waking those places to us, drawing our attention to these high places, allowing our day to begin with this fresh light, so innocent, we are filled with great fortune. And the western light of early evening touching down on Jumbo, on Sentinel, on our soul's rest at the end of day, so dramatic at times with the easy bronze alpen glow, my 8-year-old exclaims, "Daddy, this is truly gorgeous." Then there are these rooms in our home too. Parts of our valley whose dams hold back tons of toxic waste, filtered down the Clark Fork River from Butte. Parts for the famous Blackfoot River, famous not for the movie, but for its trout, its tree-lined banks, its stillness, its summer waters that cool our sweating bodies as we float, swim, and fish in it. This river, somewhat to foul with more mining waste, as if we had forgotten the lessons of Butte, forgotten that we really are all connected, gold rock to river to fish to us. Downstream is not just us anymore, but the human and non-human communities of Frenchtown, Superior, Coeur d'Alene, Spokane, and all that the Columbia River system carries and supports. And people on our streets without homes, shaking from the bitter cold, stomping feet to keep warm, nowhere to go. And the natural world continues to get second-class treatment from some. Trumpeter swans are shot. Wolves are threatened to be eliminated once again from their home, their region, our home, our region. And bears are poached with little notice, little awareness right here in the Northern Rockies. Their body parts shipped to Asian countries in a lucrative market for their gall, their bile, their paws. And we receive C's and D's on a national education report card. Many of our children not prepared to enter high school, college, or the world beyond our large geographic borders. So I cannot stop singing Missoula's praises, nor speaking her ills. We carry both, always, through time, in Montana, this state of united ones, this country among many, this sole living planet in our system, in the galaxy we recognize on a crystal night as filled with milky light, in the universe of everything that exists anywhere in space and time.
Hello, I'm Vicki Rostovich, and I have a magic hat. Now I have an essay in my hat that I'll read. It's funny, the poets that I graduated from the MFA program with were all reading essays. What's up with that? Because I went through my poems for this and I just was like, ah. So I just wrote this essay for this reading over the weekend. I shall preface it with two statements. I have always been a nomad as far as money and opportunity has allowed me to be, and I have always had fear of commitment issues. Missoula, Montana. Of course I love the summers, and now the winters too. I traveled 2,500 miles in August 1992 to get to Missoula, Montana. I came from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Really, I come from Philadelphia. Really, it's hard to shed 27 years of East Coast background and urban training. Hey, no doubt I am a Philly girl. Hey, Philly girl, hey, tough girl, hey, girl, don't ever lose your tough urban edge. Hey, what if I want to lose it? Hey, what if I want to blend it with some other way of living and turn it into something new? Hey, what if I want to transform myself? I'm betting Montana is the place where this can be done. I was born in Philly and spent my first 7 years there. Then we moved to suburbia. Boring. During my teens, I chose to return to the city to stage my rebellion. Private school in an even wealthier suburb by days, and partying in the late 80s punk scene by night. My friend Tom dancing on the car roof while we slow cruised down South Street. Catching the subway after school, still wearing my uniform of gray plaid skirt, blue knee-high socks, white Oxford shirt, and navy wool blazer. Okay. I made my escape in 1992, but not free and clear. Still on parole, with required holiday visits and summer-long stays in Philly. It's hard to separate from family and the man you think is the great love of your life, and especially the cherry and dogwood trees blossoming in the spring. So, with school finished and no clear prospects in Missoula, I abandoned Montana in 1994 to go back to Philly. I made a big commitment. Actually living in the city again, sharing a house with the boyfriend and his rock band. It was miserable. Nothing like what it had once been for me. I visited Missoula twice in the summer of 1995, twice, and in the irresistible summer. During my second visit, I lined up a job, an apartment, and a new boyfriend, all in one night at one party. Not related, though, these issues, completely unrelated. Individual achievements. So I never returned to Philly, except for a short visit full of packing and shipping boxes and saying my farewells. My vacation in Missoula didn't end for quite a while. For a long time, I was unable to commit to Montana. Until, believe it or not, last winter. Remember the winter of 1996-97? When it snowed about 5 feet in 1 week? I took photos of those funny machines they used to suck away all the snow piled up on the streets. I also invested in fleece Gore-Tex snow pants and a totally rad pair of knee-high Sheryls. To me, this exhibition of my purchasing power demonstrated a huge commitment. I ain't rich, and winter gear is costly, as my credit card bill proved a month later. But I sealed it all with a kiss on New Year's Eve, 1996, with my first night in Missoula. I had some moments of doubt in 1997 about staying much longer in this place, the common litany of complaints, difficulty finding good employment, the inflated cost of renting or buying a home, etc., etc. But this past New Year's Eve, I reaffirmed my commitment by skiing 14 miles up and around Lolo Pass. When I reached the peak of the ridge, smelled the pines, and witnessed the limitless horizon of mountains, that's when I realized why I am here. My time of bliss was shortly interrupted. when my friend and I realized we had taken the wrong trail. At 4:15 that afternoon, we reconciled ourselves to the reality that we had 7 more miles to ski. So we freaked for a couple minutes, as city kids do. But then we toughened up and pressed on. Later, when my friend and I were skiing in the dark of a new moon, hoping our muscles would hold out just long enough to get us to the truck, praying no wild animal was stalking us, giving thanks that no snowstorm was heading in, we took a little break. And he compared our experience to getting off at the absolute wrong subway stop in a city you're unfamiliar with. I looked up at the sky so full of stars and told him I'd rather take my chances out here any day. Thank you.
I'm Shaun Gant, and I have a few quick poems. I just write short ones. Don't worry. I know it's late. This poem I wrote coming home from the grocery store where I go a lot because I have a family, and it came after looking at those tabloids, you know, when you have a long line and you're in line. Okay. It's called Communion. The pineapple people came yesterday and told me to write a book about aliens. I told them it wouldn't work. I squished one of their heads by mistake, and the juice ran down my fingers and into the ice machine. The cubes are great for drinks and seem to enhance the IQs of anyone who eats them. The pineapple people visited for a second time, insisting I not call them pineapple people. I called over to the tallest one, the one with the twist tie in his hair. I said, "What am I supposed to call you? Zucchini people? Cantaloupe people? Get on with it," he said. So I wrote it down for them, and they're coming tomorrow to check this. And this is a tribute, a poem to a teacher and friend of mine that brought me to Missoula. I'm from Clancy, which is about 10 miles south of Helena. It's over the hill. So it's in his style, and it's called To Hugo from Clancy, Montana, and it's a letter poem. Dick, maybe we could go for a ride on Saturday. You'd act sheepish on Petty Creek Road. People sledding, sweating the day, us climbing away from their fun. You know, these people had fathers who died, mothers who made love with antelope. I remember these, my roads, with you. Drive around the hills, drink beer, flick cigarettes out the window. Maybe that way you're still here, not lying with one lung in a bed near Seattle. Snow 4 feet deep. You pray for more. You want this white to buy your dark loss. I want simply to live up here with you, where women bite tomatoes and men fend for them like wolves. A couple of beers at the lumberjack bar, then we go through Ponderosa and up. It's going downhill that scares me. I look at the antelope shape, blending fine hair, moonlight, and ridgeback hill. What's outside is also in us. Colt 45, your voice booming in the ear. And this is a poem. Love poem. I think, doesn't matter. It's just called a love stone. Thought of you for a while, turned when it got tight, missed the perfect world by an instant, waited for it, too much in the way. You were gone again. I was not angry, not tired, grieving like a wolf. I would not admit it didn't happen. That would be a rip in my best skirt. Shit, hate when that happens. Trivial answers elope with a blush, a surprising pirate, tripping over the plank, out to sea, in my element. Careful, you might see clear to stopping me. Careful, love might stop you. Love might carefully spend treasure saved for me. Pain stops here and now and then. Have to admit it, dare not see it. forget to talk about it. Tiger walks around. I think that was after a fight with my husband. And this is a winter poem. I think you'll recognize the scenery. It's called Thaw. Trash pries itself from the ice banks, quick hedgerows, freed, fling off their disguise. I have to be careful not to read too much into everything. For so long, I have read everything into nothing. Surprise, I release the corrupt ice king, chilling my thoughts. He licks the wandering myth, concentration. Another snow slide lets go from the skies. I have read nothing so beautiful as you coming over the hill, cool thinness jotting down the rhythms in my eyes. The remnants of ice, that layer of clear ceiling trapping the air in the pond, what does this have to do with silence? Winter, break the branching ideas. Tease the sap. You do it. Give me the slow, stunning peach of a prize. And then just two more. This one's was in Cut Bank a while ago, and it's also about winter, which I associate with oranges. I don't know why. I guess because you get oranges. They're in season. Our questions about time cleared, and I could see the sum of you, each of your red hairs, changing in my mind. First Aurora, now Macedonia, now women scraping ice from an old car, cold snapping its jaws round their necks, claiming their faces. They throw snow and pull things tight in my mind. One shakes a glove, wet snow. A heavy question falls to the curb, to her tracks. How can I look forward and away from the ice in my mind? I take more than my share of an orange lying split between us. Skin and flesh, you say, transparent food. I hold a slice to your face, sweet and good in the light. Citrus, think of apprehension, death, truth, mundane truth, asking day and every day about sun, oranges, freezing rain, clinging to the blind windshield, waiting to be cleared. As you scrape, I can see your breath blowing, white rhythms, the mastery of time in your step, the women under your coat, waiting cold and fresh. And this is a poem I wrote after I came back to Missoula, which a lot of people do, you know, you go back and forth. And when I came back, I was just fortunate to move back into the Atlantic Hotel with some friends and my family. And so it was really great to look outside the window. And if you've ever gone away and come back again, you can sort of imagine all the lives that you've lived in Missoula. And so that's what this is about. And it's called Path, with water and land. You've felt this coming on sometime. Rewind experience. Reel in ghosts. Walk in the street like they did 10 years ago. Cross your fingers. Phantoms pass ahead. Curse them. They become you in this time. This ghost turns, starts her old day's pulse in your temples. Clean stream flows through the city. Bob the past before it, a bottle you take aim for and shoot. What you've become, what you've been, souls float at night. They know this presence like the backs of camels. The landscape won't hold still. That's what's familiar. Gypsies had it good. They stood where they were on wheels, rolling from town to town, gambling the next time would be better. Expect defeat. Eat oblivion with a golden tongue. Go from living to live a while longer. Enter a fountain of live thought. Spew the ghosts back. Moths creep close and dusty. Flit and moan for your young ways. Brush past the present. Legs tents on the river.
I guess when I thought of the subject of mapping home, I naturally thought of, I've been doing research on a biography of a woman relative who was a writer, and so involved in that was finding out about my own family, because it was her family, 80 years ago and further back than that, where we originated, my mother's father's family in Mississippi. So in doing the research of her early life, it was just very interesting. To me, home is also our connections to family, even family that we never knew we had, and we really do hunger for it. It's kind of interesting. Maybe it's the older you get, the more you feel that way. But so this is an essay about, just a brief thing about doing the research for that book and what I ran into in doing that. The first time that I heard of Neil James was 2 years ago as a cautionary tale from my mother when she dropped her name into a conversation. Neil was an eccentric cousin of my Mississippi grandfather who had spent the second half of her life in Mexico, my mother said. She added that Neil was an adventurer who had not adjusted well to Southern life, and in the 30s and 40s had been a writer. No one knew if she was still alive. My grandfather had moved to Montana in 1918 for a job with the railroad. He kept in touch with his siblings, so they and their children and grandchildren were our connection to a cultural strain that manifested as dictates on moral expectations, silence on ethical dilemmas, and a dry wit. He also had an overwhelming conviction that most women die in childbirth. He and Neil were actually double first cousins, as their mothers were sisters and their fathers were brothers. Both of their mothers had died in childbirth, as well as their paternal grandmother. They had both escaped the complexities of being children of turn-of-the-century Mississippi by leaving at the first opportunity. They could maintain a family connection, yet abandon the unyielding caste structure and a history that included ancestors who, at the same time that they demonstrated a willingness to sacrifice their lives to build their children's future, did so as they watched the Cherokee pass through on their exodus, and did so with the help of slavery. Our family had only Neil's first book out of 5 that were eventually published. It had the unpromising title of Petticoat Vagabond Up and Down the World. If that indicated light-hearted, frothy adventures, I discovered that it was a well-written account of a woman who was resourceful, practical, and physically and morally courageous. She had left home in 1918 to work briefly for the War Department in Washington, D.C. By the end of the 1920s, she had been stationed at Fort Vancouver, where she learned to climb mountains, and then quit that job to hop a freighter for Hawaii, where she surfed and climbed volcanoes. After an earthquake destroyed Tokyo in 1924, she decided to have a look, leaving with enough cash to last 2 months. She found work at the American Embassy and spent her free time climbing mountains and volcanoes while hiking through Japan, China, Manchuria, and Korea. Deciding that it was time to see more of the world, she resigned from her job and traveled to India, Egypt, Italy, Germany, and France. She came from a poor family and so stopped to seek in Hawaii, where in 1934, where after overseeing their biannual convention in British Columbia in 1934, took lessons in the Russian language and traveled through Japan and Manchuria to Siberia to board the Trans-Siberian Railway from Moscow. After several side trips in Russia, she returned to the U.S. by way of the Scandinavian countries, Iceland and Greenland. She stopped long enough to take rooms at the Madison Square Hotel in New York and to write to Maxwell Perkins, the Charles Scribner's and Sons editor of Hemingway, Fitzgerald, and Woolf, requesting an interview about, quote, my desire to put in book form the story of my adventures twice around the world and up and down the longitudes, a petticoat vagabond who not only saw the world alone, but made the world pay for the seeing, unquote. 1 month later, she had her contract, and while writing about, I have lots of pencil marks here, writing about the previous 18 years of her life, contacted the Finnish, Norwegian, and Swedish governments and acquired their cooperation with her plan to live with the Lapps for 6 months in the middle of winter and to cover with a team of reindeer the upper regions of their countries. Perkins responded to her plan by saying, quote, I am glad to note what I feared would no longer be possible, that you have another trip planned, and I should think one that would furnish an excellent book." Unquote. She finished the manuscript and left for Lapland before Petticoat Vagabond was released. Everyone in her extended family received a copy. By page 2, Neil had sealed her fate with my grandfather's line for the next 60 years. She characterized her own and my grandfather's common maternal grandmother, who cared for the 2 sets of motherless grandchildren, as, quote, "a lady in every sense of the word, from the tip of her banged, curled coiffure to the toe of her dainty size 1½ slipper, beloved by the colored help. Her slaves had remained with her long after the Civil War had technically freed them. She probably accepted the care of several lively grandchildren purely from a sense of duty. I never loved her and stayed out of her sight as much as possible," unquote. The distinctions between types of freedoms and distinctions between calls to duty were to remain the governing obsessions of her life. Petticoat Vagabond was written, she said, to show other women how they could travel the world and have adventures without being an adventuress, while following what she called the still small voice within. The New York Times Book Review did not believe that it was simply a matter of getting out there and doing it. Quote, "Anyone," she says in effect, "could do what she did. We doubt it. It required abounding resolution backed by more than the elephant's child's amount of insatiable curiosity, persuasive powers of no mean order, and an unusual personality," unquote. But to my grandfather and his sisters and their children, her virtues weighed little in the balance. After Lapland, when she returned to the U.S. and the celebrity generated by her first book, she wrote a children's book about an orphaned reindeer. Gathering her courage again, she went to live with the Ainu of Hokkaido, Japan in 1940, and with the Otami of Mexico in 1942. There were always stories behind the stories that she told in the books that resulted. Let's see. After 2 life-threatening accidents on volcanoes in Mexico, she moved to Ahiak, an Indian village near Lake Chapala, and by 1946 she had built her home with her own hands, had a school, a library, and a clinic built for the villagers, imported mulberry trees and started silk weaving and embroidery businesses for the women, and had begun to help the local artists to study at centers of art in other Mexican